Hi, everybody. New Jersey forensic accountant here, Robert Bonavito. Today, we're going to discuss why 95% regret suing. What do I mean by 95 regret suing or being sued after a lawsuit's done? And what I'm saying basically is that we've worked on over 3,000 cases. And these cases, we've won or the client didn't have to pay in 99.999%. So there was only two cases that I was not satisfied with the result, and it was largely because the law firms didn't listen to what we suggested they do. And yet, even though we won money in all these cases, or the client didn't have to pay money, the client was very happy with the results as far as like, okay, we won money, we won the case, or we didn't pay. But overall, they were not too happy with the litigation when they added in time and expense and all that stuff. And the reason for this is something called the Baumol Effect. And what is the Baumol Effect? Okay, this is an economic term. And they say classic economic concept. And it explains why certain services like legal work, healthcare, and education become more expensive and require more time and investment. And the reason for this is because productivity is very difficult to have in like a legal profession or a teaching profession. And, if you have like an assembly line business where you're making cars, right? You can become more productive by getting better equipment. You can move more cars through the line, hire better people, and you'll make more money. You can produce more cars for less money, and you can pay your people more with the difference. But in labor-intensive activities, it doesn't work. If you're a teacher in 1970 and you teach 30 kids and your SAT scores are X amount, well, guess what? 50 years later, you're still teaching 30 kids and the SAT scores are the same. There's no productivity increase. But you can't afford to pay a teacher what you did in 1970, right? You can't give them $10,000, whatever they were making. Now they make $100,000 or $200,000. And that really is effective in law firms, and maybe this AI stuff is going to affect that and make productivity better, where lawyers can work faster, and if they can work 3 times as fast and still charge $400 an hour, it's better than $400 an hour and do like 1/3 the work. And remember too that again, this is economics more than anything, but law firms are competing for the same labor that these other industries are working in, and their productivity is increasing. So that's why it's such a complete disaster that when you do a intensive lawsuit, the time required, the stress, and all the other factors, and hiring experts, it kind of, it's on the other side of the balance sheet there, and you say, wow, I won X amount, but all the time I put in was not worth it. And kind of what we like to say is that, you can't make a string quartet play Beethoven's Fifth any faster, but you still have to pay the musician modern wages, right? 500 years ago, they were, paid X amount, and it's the same sympathy. So now, let's just talk about some of the stresses: time, money, stress, and and how many cases truly end well. Well, if you look at some of the statistics, about 50% win plaintiffs, or 60% of plaintiffs win. And when they say win, they're talking about money. Okay, they're not talking about time and stress and everything else. But when you look at how satisfied they had when you add in the time, the stress, the money, and all that, it's 5 to 30% individuals said they are satisfied with the outcome of litigation. Why? Why is this? Well, there's a couple factors. Legal fees eat up rewards, right? Awards. Time lag. Cases take forever. It's truly crazy how long it takes. 1 to 3 years is average, I would say. Emotional strain. When you need to invest in this case. You're working on a case. You're dealing with the case for 1 to 3 years. And there's no certainty in what's going to happen. Now, the empirical research basically says the same thing, okay? Here again, cases with lasting satisfaction 1 year later. If you talk to someone after maybe when they win the verdict, they win $1 million or $500,000, and then the lawyer takes half of it, and the other experts take a good chunk of that, and taxes may come into play. Well, typically 5 to 15% say, okay, it was worth it a year later, and again, they're adding in all these other costs that you don't count. It's just not monetary. Factors that improve the odds. Now, some people say that early settlement or mediation. My experience with mediation and arbitration is they're really not that good. A lot of times the mediators and arbitrators, they don't have enough time. They see you for 1 day a month. They schedule it out. It's usually worse. I mean, the results, and unless you're lucky enough to get good arbitrators or mediators, which a lot of times they just don't understand the case. So the same thing happens in courts, but if you're lucky enough to get one, you should look at that. But don't think it's going to be much easier. It's still going to be time consuming and expensive. Having a good attorney, pragmatic. You don't want a guy that's just a bulldog, right? Because that's gonna drag the case on. You want someone who focuses on the resolution. This is a big one. You need to have documentation and facts. This is the one thing you should get out of this video. And we're going to talk about this again. Realistic expectations. Okay, you could have. We do a lot of times we're the neutral. They'll hire our firm. We'll go in and do evaluation, and that does speed it up quite a bit. Because we don't mess around. We get things done quick. And I have a deposition coming up on a case we're neutral now, where I'm just giving you our opinion, and you can talk and take my deposition, and hopefully the case gets resolved. So that does work. What does it really mean? Okay, what does it mean to you? Does it mean money? Is it a matter of principle? The bottom line, when you factor in time, cost, stress, only about 5% of litigation participants feel they truly won. Only 5%. The rest either spend more than they recover, lose years to conflict, or regret not settling earlier. This is a checklist we give to people, and just to talk about, so they understand what's involved here, and try to make litigation better, and they understand the facts and the downside to litigation. This pre-litigation preparation, define your objectives. This is so important. What is your objective? What do you want to do? Do you want a certain amount of money? The shareholder dispute, what do you want? This is where most people fall down. You need to gather all the relevant documents, contracts, emails, and communications. A lot of times attorneys will engage us. What we do is we prepare files, okay, with the facts, and then we have all the material backing up those facts, emails, copies of correspondence, bank statements, credit card statements, and we write a little narrative, and we have all the exhibits attached. This way, if the attorney calls me, which often happens, and has a question about these expenses, we just send him that file, and we're constantly updating those files. So we have a huge litigation going on there right now. Every time they ask for something, we prepare a narrative, we have all the exhibits, and we send it to them. It's one little package, and it's titled, okay, the shareholder issue with the XYZ company, or stock certificate issue, and there's all kinds of backup to that. And we keep updating it. All the emails, communications, so they have it there. Because they'll ask me for the same thing 10 times, and I just send them the same file. You need to do that, okay? And if you don't, that's going to be a big problem. You need to be organized. You need to have your files at PDFs. You just mail them. And don't think if you give it to the attorneys, they're not going to need it again, because they will need it again. Because these cases are so long, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have cases that go for 10 years. You think that the judge and everybody remembers what they talked about 2 years ago or a year ago or even 3 months ago? They don't. You need to be organized and be able to set this, send these files again, or summaries of the files. But you need to gather all the documents. A lot of times you should start talking to forensic accountants early in the case, not late. We have cases that go on for 3 years. They bring us in, they're over in 3 months. Why? Because they don't know what they're arguing about. There's a moving target. We come in and say, here's the value. Okay? Talk to a forensic accountant. Talk to an attorney. This is all preliminary, right? Understand what kind of case you have. Maybe legally you don't have a case. estimate potential cost, time, commitment, obviously. Dispute resolution, my feeling is these things don't usually work, but, you can try it. Maybe you'll get lucky and have, good people in there. Again, litigation preparations, the same thing, okay? You have the same, this is the same as part one. Make sure you have an outline. If you have a complaint, make sure you draw up the complaint, give it to the attorney. Obviously, they're going to change it, and that's their expertise. But you have to have your facts and everything so they can just take it and fix it and put it in a legal form. The other big mistake people is they don't look at the other side. Client like 6 months ago, and all they did was talk about their issues. They never mentioned the other side's issues, and I pointed them out. Okay, and a lot of what he was saying didn't make sense because the other side was saying made more sense, and he didn't like that because he never looked at the other side. And we in our cases we spend more time looking at their arguments than our arguments, because if they make more sense, well, what are we doing, right? And this is very, very hard to do, okay? You have to understand what they're saying, and maybe they're right? Maybe they're right. And maybe, there's always, people are always partially right and wrong. I mean, that's just the way litigation is. But maybe they're 51% right and you're 49% right, okay? Or maybe it's 20, or maybe you're 80-20. But psychologically, people cannot look at their what they did wrong, or what actions they did, and we point them out in court on our side because we analyze the other side and we say, well, okay, this is what our client did, but again, that's the lawyer's job. We don't really talk about that. We'll answer those questions on cross, but we're really focused on what they did wrong, okay? But if you're a litigant, you better understand what the other side's argument is, and you got to drill down, because if you're just listening to your attorney or even your friend, they may kind of slant the case. They may be, okay, you know what? Let's just, we believe what you're saying. So the only thing you really need to get out of this video is two things. You better have all your documents in order, and you better understand the other side. You better understand what their issues are. And if they have a strong case, you may want to consider settling. And the rest of this list, kind of is basic stuff. Make sure you're involved, make sure you go to trial. This is going to take time. Don't just trust the attorney unless you have so much money you don't care. Some companies have so much money they use the legal, system as a weapon. Fine, just let the attorneys do whatever they want. That does happen. They don't really care. Okay, they just want to drain the other side of resources. If that's the plan, okay, maybe you don't have to do all this stuff, because the attorneys are really good at wasting time and billing. But that's only 10% of the cases where it's just like, whatever it costs, just do it. So if that's the type of situation you're in, where you don't care about the money or time, or you're not going to spend any time, that's fine. But if you do care about the time, the money, and all the stress, then this list is, again, the two main issues that we talked about are important, and you better spend time on it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please smash that like sign. Robert A. Bonavito, New Jersey Forensic Accountant. Thanks for watching, guys.